Some villains are just timeless. From the Norse pantheon to the Marvel comic book and cinematic universes, Loki has been one of those standout villains that everyone loves. While hammer-wielding strongman heroes get all the glory these days, it's those clever trickster gods who always manage to capture our imagination in many different ways. Plus, they're just fun. So here are some of the times Loki outplayed pretty much everybody. Even before Loki found out he was adopted, he struggled to win his father's approval while the boorish and headstrong Thor lived in his father's grace. In the MCU, since Odin seemed to appreciate Thor's warrior skills, Loki managed to hatch a plan to make himself look like a hero. Thor's attack of Jotunheim angered Odin so much that he sent his eldest son to Midgard without his trusty hammer Mjolnir, until he learned his lesson. During this time, Odin was in Odin's sleep as Loki took the throne of Asgard and invited the frost giants over to kill the Allfather. But it was just a trap so Loki could kill Laufey and earn his dad's respect. Even Thor's brash move was a part of Loki's manipulation. Unfortunately for Loki, Thor earns his hammer back in time to save the day, but not actually stop Loki's plan. After Loki's incredibly convoluted plan to earn his adopted dad's love with a planned invasion and subsequent assassination, it just didn't work out the way he expected. He made one last plea with Odin for acceptance. Odin was understandably still a little upset at being usurped and manipulated. Remember, he's also the one who banished his other son for simply not listening to him, so Loki decided to let go and fall into the void. While Loki's actions were diabolical, and he did try to kill his own brother once Sif and the Warriors 3 went to Earth to retrieve Thor, the feeling of wanting to be accepted by your parents only to be rejected was pretty relatable. Despite his deceptions, it was still a bittersweet moment to watch Loki fall away after failing to gain acceptance. For a moment, you actually started to feel for Loki, but then again, he's the God of Mischief. This apparent death lasted as long as the credits, where Loki manages to show up again, manipulating Dr. Selvig, who has been tasked by S.H.I.E.L.D. to unlock the secrets of the Tesseract. This deception would introduce us to Loki's pattern of death and destruction. The Hulk is a mixed blessing in the MCU. He's a seemingly unstoppable smashing machine. Well, he was an unstoppable smashing machine. But even Banner has a hard time controlling the big guy. After all, there's a reason why Banner was hiding out in Calcutta, which is also why Loki had Selvig alter the Tesseract to emit gamma radiation. No one knows more about gamma radiation than Bruce Banner, so S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers would be forced to retrieve Banner to find the lost Tesseract. Brilliant. Then it's just a matter of stressing Banner out with an attack on the helicarrier and leaving it to the Hulk to smash the Avengers before they ever form. It works great, but Loki isn't able to escape the consequences for long and finds out the hard way that the Hulk doesn't like being toyed with. When you make several attempts at taking over more than one of 9 realms, you might end up at the conclusion that no one wants you around. There are many ways you can change yourself to be a better person, or if you're a trickster god, you can just change yourself into a better person. After the plan in Avengers goes wrong, Loki ends up jailed in Asgard to think about what he's done. After the Odin son's mother, Frigga, is killed in an invasion by Malekith, Algrim and the Dark Elves, Loki joins his brother for a chance to avenge his beloved adopted mother. The charming villain of Thor and the Avengers holds his own, even seeming to sacrifice himself to save his brother. Being impaled on the sword he just ran through Algrim, but in true Loki fashion, he shows up again, this time impersonating the Allfather himself, Odin. He not only gets to hear his brother touchingly eulogize his supposed sacrifice, but in Ragnarok, we see him watching a play about his heroics. That's top-notch trickery. Plus, is that Matt Damon? Being an ally with Loki can be a tricky proposition. In the 1973 comic book crossover between the Avengers and the Defenders, Loki teamed up with Dormammu to assemble the 6 pieces of an artifact called the Evil Eye. Unfortunately, nothing good ever comes of Marvel characters who gather 6 of something. Loki tricks the Defenders, at the time made up of Doctor Strange, the Hulk, Namor, Silver Surfer, Valkyrie, and Hawkeye, into gathering the pieces. Then, being Loki, he prevents the Avengers, made up of Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Black Panther, Mantis, and Swordsman, as a fail-safe to keep Dormammu from using the Evil Eye on Asgard. While Cap and Namor realize they're being manipulated, Dormammu still gets the eye but is betrayed once again by Loki. There really is no telling with Loki, For fans of the comics, the fight on the helicarrier between the mighty Thor and the ever-loving Hulk was a familiar one because it was the same fight that gave us the Avengers in the comics. This time it came in the form of a manipulation by Loki from the Isle of Silence, where he had been banished for earlier shenanigans. So many shenanigans. Loki tricks the Hulk into destroying a bridge, thinking he's saving it, but in reality, Loki is making people think that the Hulk is on another rampage. He makes sure this message reaches Thor, hoping the Hulk might beat up his brother in the process. The plan goes awry when Iron Man, Ant-Man, and the Wasp end up getting involved, and Loki inadvertently forms the Avengers, but he managed to fight Earth's mightiest heroes without throwing a single punch. Walt Simonson had a legendary run as a writer for Thor, and saw the creation of some fan favorites like Beta Ray Bill, although perhaps his most notorious story is when he turned Thor into a frog. Yeah, that's right. That passing reference in Ragnarok actually happened. Loki had enchanted a waitress to kiss the god of thunder, which turned him into a frog so that Loki could make another attempt at the throne of Asgard. No matter what form Thor takes, though, Thor is still Thor. He ends up fighting a war between frogs and rats in Central Park, and even managed to regain his Thor powers in frog form to defeat Loki. During that time, Thor met another man turned into a frog. How common is this exactly? Who managed to wield a sliver of Mjolnir, turning Simon Walterson, aka Puddle Gulp, into the mighty Throg. They don't call Loki the God of Mischief for nothing. It's not just the Avengers that Loki likes to mess with. There are other Marvel teams that have found themselves manipulated by Loki's complex plans. In the Marvel Universe, powers often come with a cost. Loki manages to place a fire fountain in the Great White North that takes away the consequences of powers and gives regular people abilities of their own. The catch is that anyone who gets their power from magic dies. Alpha Flight and the X-Men are forced to make a decision. They either take the gift at the cost of the magical beings of the world, or reject the gift and live their lives with their burdens in place. It's such a messed up situation that the Elder Gods show up to admonish Loki for it. The two teams eventually reject the gift and destroy the fire fountain, leaving the burdened heroes to imagine the easier lives they'll never have. Believe it or not all of Loki's plans revolve around taking Asgard. Sometimes he just wants to cause a little chaos, like during the Acts of Vengeance storyline. Taking a page out of his dad's playbook by appearing as a stranger to some of Earth's best-known villains, Loki convinced some of them to switch rivals, pitting Iron Man villain the Mandarin against the X-Men, and Spider-Man's nemesis the Vulture against the New Mutants. Of course, the problem is that villains are hard to get along with. For instance, Holocaust survivor Magneto isn't super fond of teaming up with super scientist and soldier Red Skull, whose Hydra was the science arm of the Nazis. While the plan eventually fell apart, for a good amount of time, Loki caused chaos in the Marvel Universe without most people even knowing it was his idea. While Ragnarok seems tragic, it turns out that in the Marvel Universe, it's a common occurrence that happens often to fuel beings known as those who sit above in shadows, which doesn't sound creepy at all. After one of those Ragnarok events, Loki appeared to have come back as a woman. In her new feminine form, Loki sought to regain the trust of Asgard while working with Dr. Doom to revive some Asgardian foes like Surtur. Loki also tried to convince Asgard that Beta Ray Bill was a Skrull, but Thor was able to expose the lie. This led to Loki joining the Cabal with Norman Osborn, Emma Frost, Dr. Doom, the Hood, and Namor, as yet another bid to take over Asgard began. What makes this particularly dark is that regular male Loki was actually inhabiting the body of Thor's girlfriend, Lady Sif. The less you think about how that works, the better. The secret invasion event threw the Marvel Universe into a bit of chaos. After the dust settled, S.H.I.E.L.D. had become Hammer, and its head was Norman Osborn, better known as the Green Goblin. Not content with just heading the government's secret security organization, he also formed the Cabal, with such marquee villains as Dr. Doom, Emma Frost, Namor, the Hood, and of course, Loki. As we know, however, Loki likes to hedge his bets. During an invasion by the Elder God Chthon, Loki appears as the Scarlet Witch to form a new Avengers team, which he uses to fend off the attack as part of his plan to undermine Osborn and destabilize an already shaky world. You'd think that after all this time, people would think twice before teaming up with Loki, but then again, Osborn isn't exactly known for his rational decision-making. Osborn as the leader of Hammer and the Cabal wasn't the only strange thing going on in the wake of the secret invasion. The entire Marvel Universe was topsy-turvy. For instance, Asgard now resided 300 feet above a small town in Oklahoma, not Norway. Interesting choice. With the magical land hovering above America's heartland, Loki managed to convince Osborn that Asgard represented a threat to Earth and needed to be attacked. However, how he did it was pure Loki. After a series of events with the dual entity Sentry and Void, Osborn agreed to go into therapy to prevent himself from becoming the Green Goblin again. Loki, being Loki, stepped in, undercut that, and actually caused Osborn to relapse into his Green Goblin self. We're sure Peter Parker was thrilled. Naturally, this was all in an effort for Loki to take the throne of Asgard. He's persistent, that guy. You gotta give him that. Lady Loki and her dual membership in the Cabal and the Dark Avengers wouldn't be the end of Loki coming back in different forms. Everything seems to go to plan with the attack on Asgard, but once Loki sees his people falling to the Dark Avengers, he does what Loki does best, betrays them and then does something very un-Loki-like. He sacrifices himself to save his homeworld. But you can't keep a good Loki down, no. He comes back as a kid who only has faint memories of his former self that riddles him with guilt, despite the completely well-founded skepticism of pretty much everyone who has known him. Kid Loki struggles to do the right thing and atone for his former self. Except, of course, it was all a trick by regular Loki, who eventually sacrifices Kid Loki to return. As the seat of power for the 9 realms, Asgard needs a lot of protection. Over time, Asgard has made more than a few enemies, and Thor can't be everywhere. In the comic books, the Sky Fathers, which includes Odin and Zeus among others, created the Destroyer as a failsafe against the 4th host of Celestials. Odin was even able to wear it, gathering all the power of the Asgardians and growing to an ear-popping 2,000 feet tall. How's the weather up there? Yeah. With something that powerful lying around and as someone as devious as Loki, it's only a matter of time before it gets misused. In the comics, Loki found the Temple of Darkness and used it to try and kill Thor, only stopping when Odin threatened to kill Loki if he didn't pull back. In the MCU, the Destroyer is sent to Midgard to prevent the Warriors 3 and Sif from getting Thor's hammer back. Loki is why Asgard just can't have nice things. For the ultimate timeline, Loki has more than one trick up his sleeve. First was convincing the world and Thor himself that he was Thorleif Goldman, a psychiatric nurse and self-help writer. While Goldman says he knew he was Thor since his teenage years, there might have been other reasons he had a hard time convincing people of that, including himself. You guessed it, that reason is Loki. During the formative years of the Thunder God's time on Earth, Loki had put an enchantment on Thor that made people, including Thor, not believe he was actually Thor. Doubt about your own identity isn't the kind of thing you can hit with a hammer, and it wasn't until Thor beat back an alien invasion that anyone believed who he was. Before Thor hit the silver screen for the first time, Marvel released a new origin story for the God of Thunder on Earth, and predictably, his trickster brother had some shenanigans up his sleeve. More shenanigans. This time the plan is to remove compassion and empathy from the God of Thunder, who then promptly goes about trying to be worshipped like he was in the past. In this process, he runs afoul of the Thing and Spider-Man. Sadly, the Thing ends up getting clobbered, and Spider-Man takes a ride into space with Mjolnir, killing both characters. Wait, what? Once free of Loki's manipulation, Thor's filled with remorse, which moves Odin to undoing the damage and making the world forget Thor's excesses. He still has to save Washington, D.C. from Loki and an army of demons to win Earth over, though. At the beginning of the first Thor movie, we get to see a pair of brothers who seem to get along. Loki even plays the dutifully reluctant brother who cautions his brasher sibling against rash moves. Rash moves, however, are Thor's specialty, and the Thunderer and his besties make their way to Jotunheim anyway. With a passing insult, the whole thing goes predictably wrong, and a fight breaks out between the Frost Giants and the Asgardians that has to be broken up by one very upset Odin. This results in Odin sending Thor to Midgard without his hammer to think about what he's done, leaving Asgard without its favorite prince right before the Odin sleep. Only it turns out the whole mess was part of Loki's elaborate plan to get the favorite son out of Asgard before the Odin sleep so he could take the throne. While Loki can use enchantments and spells for this, he took advantage of his hot-headed family to really get the job done. The problem with being the foe of a powerful superhero like the mighty Thor is that those hammer blows really hurt. Unless you're also a hammer-wielding, super strong, super tough person, you might want to look for someone to stand in the way of Mjolnir and all that lightning. Traditionally, of course, Loki has done that by tricking others into taking on his burly brother, like the Hulk, but he's also been known to create a villain or two to take on the God of Thunder, including the Wrecking Crew and Absorbing Man, manipulating events to give them superpowers and fight the Thunderer on his behalf. This generally doesn't work out well for them though. Like we said, teaming up with Loki is problematic at best, and hammer blows hurt. For Phase 1 of the MCU, Nick Fury's secret weapon when dealing with outsized characters like Tony Stark and the mighty Thor was the unflappable Phil Coulson. Coulson had become a beloved figure, affable and capable, not even intimidated by the God of Thunder. Coulson had even become close to the other people who had to deal with the outsized personalities that he was in charge of. Pepper kept track of Phil's personal life and his budding romance with a cellist, and Coulson himself was a bit of a fanboy for the Star-Spangled Captain America, a fact Nick Fury used to influence the Avengers. When Loki got himself captured in order to begin forming the Avengers, his escape was seemingly thwarted by Agent Coulson holding a weapon he didn't even understand. Knowing that a mind-controlled Coulson wouldn't fool anyone, he removed Coulson violently. And for once, it backfired. Coulson's death rallied the Avengers, and Coulson himself wound up in a magical place. One thing that you can always count on with Loki is that he'll always look out for Loki. If in the moment you find that you and Loki have the same threat, Loki might actually come through for you. In the MCU, Loki has a difficult relationship with the Hulk. Even for the Avengers, the Hulk has been a troublesome ally. During Ragnarok, the Hulk managed an uneasy alliance with Loki and Thor's Revengers, helping bring about Ragnarok only for the fleeing Asgardians to encounter the Mad Titan Thanos. While Loki couldn't help anyone but himself to the Tesseract on the way out the door, handing it over to Thanos turned out to be a part of his plan so that he could give Thanos a taste of the Hulk's rage. Unfortunately for all involved, Hulk hadn't encountered someone as strong as Thanos before. It didn't go very well. These were just some of the times that the God of Mischief lived up to his title and outplayed everybody. What are some of your favorite Loki moments? Who would you like to see him encounter? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU content. Thanks for watching.